Hi, everyone. Welcome to lecture number 3. Today, we're going to talk about optimizing controlled environment agriculture in California. My name is Dan Ovadia, your instructor for Fundamentals of Controlled Environment Agriculture with UC Riverside. Exciting program. Thanks for being here. What is the CEA system? We're going to keep hammering this in. It is 3 key pillars, and it is a interaction between greenhouse technology, regional climate, and the crop requirements. And when all these things interact together and are thought about in a data-driven manner, you can be highly successful in this area. In the first 2 lectures, we talked a fair amount about greenhouse technology and the different technology levels. Today, I'm going to focus primarily on regional climate in California. And California is an amazing place regarding our climate, and we have so many different climates. The question for you is, in your controlled environment project, which is the best climate for what you want to grow? So we will cover quite a bit on regional climate. And to talk about regional climate, we will talk a little bit about crop growth requirements as well. So those are the 2 topics today. Think of the system as those 3 pillars interacting. So California controlled environment, there are several key benefits and challenges of CEA in California. I'll start with the benefits or advantages. Clearly, there's a large and very diverse high-end consumer market here, and we're talking about tens of millions of people in California in and with adjacent states. The second point is California is providing incentives for sustainable and efficient CEA technology and businesses. So this can be everything from advanced LED lighting to cogen energy to reduce energy rates. There's a lot of incentives out there, and you need to know how to tap into that. And in fact, in Netherlands, where controlled environment is highly advanced, the government in the Netherlands highly subsidized controlled environment agriculture and support it at quite a level. California is not there, but it's certainly something that CEA projects should consider for California. And then in the state, we have access to a fair amount of agricultural talent, technology, and capital investment. So California has an incredible history in agriculture, starting, in open field and orchard, but it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So we have that fundamental infrastructure and ecosystem of agricultural talent, technology, and capital in California. On the challenging side, of course, is cost. So land is quite expensive here, especially in good climates. So think of Napa Valley and wine grapes. That is some of the best growing climate in the world for any crop, definitely for grapes, but it's also that exact same climate is actually good for a controlled environment, greenhouse infrastructure, and of course that's quite expensive. The operating cost is high as well. So we have high energy costs, we have high labor costs, and we have high material costs. So those are all things you need to consider when doing business in the state of California. And then the initial construction costs or the capital costs to build can be high. Materials and environmental regulations add additional burden onto the capital costs of building a facility. So the last one is that because we have this great agricultural history in California, controlled environment has to compete directly with open field agriculture. So just think about leafy, brassica, and berries, strawberries. They have very mature, very successful open field production, and they have very advanced technology. And I'll be completely honest, a lot of the open field farms that are highly successful in California are kind of scratching their head, and they're a little bit skeptical of the controlled environment people. So there's a little bit of I would say a rivalry there. However, I prefer to not choose sides and not um, diminish any particular segment of agriculture. I think we all need to respect anyone that puts seed to soil, and that includes open field farmers solving their challenges, and it includes controlled environment agriculture in California. So that's kind of a high level overview of where California is at in this particular area. Now, I wanted to share some details about this facility because I find it to be so cool and it involves a lot of what we're going to talk about it today. So, this is in Tehachapi, California. And so it's on the southern end of the Central Valley and north of Riverside, and in 16 greenhouses. And they're claiming that these 16 acres of greenhouse for lettuce production is equivalent to 480 acres of field lettuce. And the reason is they can probably get 9 to 10 generations a year of head lettuce out of this facility, or even higher if it's going to be spring mix that has a lower cycle time from seed to harvest. So you can see how the numbers get up quite high. You go from 16 acres to 480 acres. Now, this Tehachapi location is really interesting if you look at the climate. It's higher elevation, so it's not in the Central Valley. And that high elevation allows it to have more mild temperatures throughout the year, meaning the summers are really not as hot as the Central Valley. So that gives them quite an advantage for leafy production. The other advantage, it's an incredibly sunny location, 275 days of pure sunshine per year. And I bet there's probably another 60 or 80 days of partly sunny climate here. So, what does this mean? What does a sunny climate mean? It means that 90% of the light needs that they have to grow their lettuce are supplied by the sun, which is free, completely free compared to supplemental lighting, even LED lighting, which costs a tremendous amount of money to purchase and to run. So 90% of the energy needed to grow their crop is free just from the sky. And that's a huge advantage, especially versus vertical farms. The other thing is access to Arizona, California, and Nevada grocery distribution hubs. This is a really big one. And they really want to be positioned near those distribution hubs because the whole idea is to be somewhat local and to have your supply chain providing those distribution hubs with a steady and regular high quality product that the distribution hubs can count on and predict. Unlike the field where you can have crop losses and you can have setbacks, and that's really disruptive to the supply chain. So that's an exciting facility. I think it's kind of an example of the thought process we want everyone to think about as they go into controlled environment. Sustainability. Everyone in agriculture believes in conserving resources and being efficient. And that's really what sustainability is about. It's about being very efficient with your resources. So CEA sustainability, in my mind, begins with choosing the right regional climate. And here's why. Here are the environmental advantages of favorable climates. Number one, it's going to increase your yield because you're going to have improved crop health and reduced crop stress produces more food per unit of space and time. It's just a matter of having really healthy, vigorous crops, fewer crop losses under extreme weather, and being able to deliver yield. And the more yield you produce, the more efficient you are at producing yield, the more environmental benefit there is. The right climate also, as we'll discuss today, can reduce your energy consumption significantly. So the closer you get to the temperature and light requirements of your crop, whether it's berries, tomato, or lettuce, the closer you are, the climate is to your crop targets and crop requirements, the lower your heating, cooling, and lighting requirements are. And that's really where most of the cost comes from controlled environment when you're operating. It's lighting, it's cooling, and it's heating. So reduced energy consumption there. And then another way to think about this, the other way this is environmentally sustainable is that the farm actually succeeds and gets a return on its investment. So you basically have a longer farm life, and all those construction materials have a longer productivity window. So, we have to be honest, there are companies now who have built huge multi-million dollar facilities and they don't work because they either weren't designed properly or they're in the wrong climate. This is true with some vertical farms as well. These facilities will eventually be torn down and demolished, and all of that electrical and plastic will just go straight to the landfill. And that is happening, and that can happen when you're not taking climate into consideration. So we like to think about this. When you build something, you want it to last as long as possible. And this is just a picture of one of our clients, local bounty, outstanding people there. And here's one of their facilities, larger lettuce facilities. Okay, now we're going to get into Köppen climate types in California. Here's a link and encourage people to read about Köppen. It is simply a way to classify different regional climates. And you can see in California, we have tremendous diversity in our climates. There are some simple codes here that they have chosen to describe everything from alpine environment to desert to coastal to valley. And so we're going to talk right now about what they call cool summer Mediterranean climates. Okay. So it's an interesting description. I think it's actually quite useful when you think about it. Cool summer Mediterranean. So what this simply means is mild summer temperatures, and we'll go into more detail as to what that means. But think of Palm Springs versus San Diego in the summer. Huge temperature difference, right? Those are cool summer Mediterranean climates here along the coast. Now, these are currently ideal for open field leafy and strawberry production. There's a tremendous amount of open field production all up and down the California coast, almost exclusively because of the climate and the soil type. This happens to also be an outstanding location for controlled environment agriculture, specifically greenhouses, because you have all of that cooling. You tend to have a lot of light, and it never gets very cold in the winter for your heating requirements. So it's outstanding land for a controlled environment. The downside is that the labor and the water are all significantly more expensive than other locations. So again, you're going to have to do that consideration and do that math essentially to see if a piece of land is worth it, or if you want to push into um, areas that maybe aren't as ideal, but you get a great price on the land and have better water and access to labor. Those are all considerations to consider. But the main point here is cool coastal climates are optimal for crops like leafy and berry production. Because remember, berries require high light and cool temps. Lettuce requires low light and high temps. Sorry, low light and low temps. So both of these are cool season crops. Berries require a bit more light, but the key thing here is cool temperature. Both these plants like cool temperature, and that's going to help you a lot if you're in a favorable cool summer climate. Now, the next one I want to highlight is getting close to kind of Riverside's environment, but these are the warm and sunny inland valley climates, and these are suitable for fruiting crops, as we described last time. So we're going to call these hot summer Mediterranean climates. These have hot summer temperatures. It's very clear for 5 months of the year. It's going to be quite warm there. They also have tremendous amounts of natural light. And with the natural light also comes irradiance, the heat from the sun, and that drives up your cooling requirement. These can be very suitable for melon, tomato, and cucumber, all of which require heat units and light to be productive and to have that high yield and have that high quality and have fast cycle time. Now, as you get away from the coast, you're going to have lower land costs, and that can be a tremendous benefit. So think about that trade-off there. And then the one thing to also consider is when you're growing in hot summer Mediterranean zones, you're going to have to put more investment into your cooling technology. And we'll talk about that in advanced CEA. There are many, many innovations that have occurred around advanced cooling, and it's just going to require some more investment to get that enhanced cooling response. Okay, now getting to specific cities to give you an example of how this process works of climate selection. California, as we said, has many regions, many climates, but quite a few have high average monthly temperatures for those 5 warm months of the year, and that's this black box here. So when I look at data around climate, and when you look at data around climate, you should really focus in on those summer months. If you were in Minnesota, for example, you might look more carefully at the winter temperatures and what is the heating requirement in those zones, and that's more of a cold extreme zone. We're really in a warm climate that can have high temperature extremes. So that's why I highlight these 5 months in these zones. So think about this: cold summer zones, great for leafy production, but very expensive land. Here are two examples. You have San Francisco and Los Angeles. Look at these highs here. You're in the 70s, maybe you hit 80s in LA. San Francisco, you are in the 60s all day long. And so you have a lot of controlled environment agriculture south of San Francisco and Half Moon Bay, where all the orchids are produced. And that is just 100% because it's an incredibly cool environment for orchids and greenhouse production. Um, Hot desert zones suitable for winter production potentially, but if you look at a town like Needles, you're getting up to 95, 104, 109 as average highs. And of course, that's not even the extreme high. You can easily get up into, 115, 120 degrees here. And the thing is, greenhouse technology is great, but there's a limit to how much you can cool your facility. Might be 20 degrees, it might be 17 degrees, but if you need to grow lettuce at 72 degrees and it's 115 degrees out, do the math. It's very, very difficult to hit your crop target when it's this hot. Now there's Riverside. So Riverside is actually quite similar to other climates in the Central Valley of California, like Sacramento and Davis. So I'm very, very familiar with this type of climate. We call these hot summer zones. You can absolutely be successful with fruiting crops when you put a little more money into cooling systems. And I think you can even be successful with berries, and you can be successful with leafy if you're willing to potentially not grow for a couple of the hottest months of the year, which has its own cost. But this is kind of the selection process of looking at zones, looking at the actual data, and making a very clear decision what's best for you. Okay, here's another way to look at it. And, graphs can make it more simple. But if you look, this is one thing we do for clients in the controlled environment space, but we look at 30-year monthly average high temperature. So these are the highs, the average high uh, temperature per month in a particular location. So Salinas, California is on the coast. Bakerfield is in the Central Valley, and southern Central Valley, and Davis is in the northern Central Valley. So you can see here the differences between these climates. The coastal climate is much, much cooler, only having a high average temperature of 75 degrees. So if you're thinking about lettuce, the next step you would do is be like, okay, what's roughly my day temperature target for leafy crops? It's between, you know, 76, 78 degrees and maybe 68 degrees at night. So this is kind of your temperature range. And so think about it. Um, your greenhouse needs to be maintaining this temperature range. And so the point is, in the hot summer zones like Bakersfield and Davis, you're going to have a much larger cooling requirement to hit your target. This means increased costs and potentially lower yield and quality if you're growing leafy crops. Look how much cooling you need to have from 95 to 75, let's say, for a couple months out of the year. Now compare that to Salinas, where you're already kind of in the zone, and these are the cool summer zones we talked about on the coast. These have a reduced cooling requirement. They have lower capital investment costs and lower operating costs. And oftentimes, if you know what you're doing, you can get amazing quality out of facilities that are placed in these incredible climates like Salinas, California. And again, that's why so much open field production is currently done in specific areas because of the climate. Okay, so that was our discussion of optimizing CEA in California, focused a whole lot on climate and a little bit on the California ecosystem. So point number one is clearly California has distinct benefits and challenges. As I pointed out, there is still significant investment from very innovative companies in California. Um, because of the advantages that I mentioned. It really has a favorable climate, and we have a lot of investment, and we do have talent here. And think about it, there are some companies who say, you know what, I can't do business in California, it's just too expensive. They're trying to push into regions like Texas and the Southeast, where the climate is not nearly as favorable. And to be honest, many of those attempts are proving to be very, very challenging for greenhouses in those very hot, near subtropical climates. So California certainly has an advantage, and people know about it. Innovative companies are finding a way to do business here. Um, Sustainability, I'd really like all the participants here to think about efficiency. Okay, this is best achieved by selecting the best climate for your farm, and that's it. It's about reducing the cost of construction and your operating costs and using less electricity, less fuel to produce your crop. In addition to climate, of course, you need to also consider things like overall cost of the land, transportation, and labor. All of that will lead to your farm being successful and ultimately sustainable. The fourth point is, again, we want people to match their crop growth requirements that we've talked about in lecture one and two to the most suitable climate for your greenhouse project. So choose your crop. Let's say it's raspberries, find out what raspberry needs and select a climate and a location to build that greenhouse and make sure you can hit your targets. California has very diverse climate and quite a few different Köppen climate classifications. And just go ahead and study those carefully. I have a link in the additional learning section where you can go in and learn about those different climate types quickly and choose what's best for you. And finally, um, here's the deal with greenhouse. Greenhouse technology is amazing. As I said, the engineering is incredible. So you can push the limits of your climate with greenhouse technology. So you can get more heating and you can get more cooling and you can get more lighting if you're not in the ideal situation. That's fine. Just understand that less optimal climates will add cost to your investment. But that's the exciting part. And that's what a lot of companies are searching for right now. How do I push the limits of my location and my climate with new innovations and keep my costs down? Both the capital investment costs and the operating costs. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time for lecture 4.